Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Showed up today and it's just chaos. There's a huge line to get toilet paper.
What's the hardest thing to find right now?
I mean, you got everybody and their brother going and buying all the toilet paper. Yes. It's pretty bad. My 62-year-old dad had to come to my house yesterday and get 10 rolls of it because can't buy it at the store.
It's not just that stores ran out of toilet paper early on in this pandemic. It's that there's been a total lack of supply, which seems to persist. The shelf is basically always empty. Now, I had understood all this as an irrational hoarding of toilet paper. But journalist Will Oremus actually took the time to report out the toilet paper supply chain story in his recent piece, What's Everyone Getting Wrong About the Toilet Paper Shortage? And it turns out it is actually perfectly rational, and there is a perfectly good reason and explanation for it. And joining me now is Will Oremus, senior writer for Medium. Will, I learned a lot from your piece. So I had seen all these memes, right, about these jokes being like, the symptoms aren't gastrointestinal, like there's no reason for people to be stocking up on this. This was all panic buying. Why is that not the case? Why is that not the reason that we have these shortages?
Well, certainly it started with some hoarding and panic buying when people first realized they were going to be home for a while. People went out to the stores, bought toilet paper so they'd have enough to get by. But the shortages in stores have persisted long past when they should have stopped. If you go to the store now, you'll see they only let you buy one package at a time, and yet they still can't keep toilet paper in stock. So I went looking for why this could be, talked to people in the toilet paper industry, and found a sort of fascinating answer, one that starts with the realization that, yes, everybody's using the bathroom the same amount, presumably, under the time of coronavirus as we were before, but we're using it in a different place. We're now using it at home around the clock. Those 75% of Americans or so who are staying at home all day, they use toilet paper that you buy from the store every time they go to the bathroom. It used to be that people were using toilet paper in schools, at their office buildings, in restaurants and hotels and airports. Now, all that toilet paper isn't getting used.
And so you've got basically two places that people can use the bathroom, right? At home and out at the various places, their offices, their college dorms, the airport bathrooms. And what you sort of discovered, which is fascinating, is that they're just not the same market. In fact, there's basically two markets that have nothing to do with each other to service those two kinds of toilet paper.
Yeah, that's what I found that was fascinating. So the toilet paper you buy in the store, it's pretty nice, right? It's soft, it's plush, it's usually embossed somehow. A toilet paper company told me it's actually 100% virgin fiber, which kind of blew my mind. The toilet paper that you get at work or at an airport, that stuff is thin, it's single ply, it's usually made from recycled sheets. It's not only is it a different product, but it's made by different companies. It's made on different assembly lines in different mills. And so the companies that are supplying all the toilet paper to the workplaces that are closed around the country, they aren't the same ones that have the relationship with Kroger or Safeway or Rite Aid or CVS to get those toilet papers, those rolls, those 6-packs into stores and back on the shelves. So we've presumably got some huge glut of that commercial toilet paper lying around, and all the companies are scrambling to fill the demand for the toilet paper that you usually buy at the store.
Which is just fascinating. So there's this completely separate supply chain for basically industrial or commercial and residential use. They don't have anything to do with each other. They're actually different products. They have different vendor relationships. They're different companies, it turns out. And when people are staying home, there's a 40% increase in their use of it at home, and presumably some massive commercial glut that's sitting there on pallets that was supposed to be delivered to things like dorms and airports that's not going out the door.
Yeah, that's right. And so you would think that maybe they could just reallocate some of that supply, right? Maybe retool their mills a little bit, start cranking out more of the retail stuff. But the other factor here is that the toilet paper industry is kind of unique. Toilet paper is really bulky, but it's not worth much money. So there's very little excess supply. Nobody's going to be storing a bunch of extra toilet paper in warehouses because it's not cost effective. And their assembly lines were already working at full capacity to meet the very steady, predictable demand. So if that demand shifts even a little bit, they don't have room to change. And now if they spend a bunch of money to tool up for the retail market and start cranking out more of that, then when, knock on wood, eventually things go back to normal, people start going out in the world again and using the bathroom somewhere other than home, then they'll be in trouble again because they will have changed their whole operation and they'll be out of step with demand.
Right, so they don't want to fix. They don't want any sort of fixed capital investment for over the long term for what is going to be hopefully a temporary situation. A, and B, this extremely bulky thing that takes up a ton of space is worth essentially nothing, and so there's nothing worse for your spreadsheet if you're a business than holding onto a ton of worthless inventory. So all of it is basically like a razor thin, just-in-time operation that can't scale up.
You got it. That's exactly right. And there are other products, by the way, that are going to have similar dynamics. They're not all the same as toilet paper, and each one has its own story. But for instance, bananas, there are the bananas that go to the commercial market, to restaurants and to workplaces. They're petite bananas. They're little and they come loose, whereas the bananas that go to grocery stores are big and beautiful and come in big bunches of 6. They're separate supply chains again, so people are trying to figure that out. You know, there's beer going into kegs for the restaurant market versus going into bottles for the home market. And so I would expect to see more sort of sporadic shortages as this type of problem works its way through all kinds of different sectors.
It is Wednesday, the 8th of April of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of this meddlesome priest? Oh, did you hear that the Trump administration is now going to pay ministers because of the economic hit that they are experiencing during the pandemic? Because apparently not enough people are putting money in the collection plate because no one's there to put money in the collection plate. Gee, you'd think if they were a modern religious organization, they would have some online contributing site in which people could contribute. But we know what's really up here, don't we? I thought there was a separation of church and state. Now, I'm pretty sure if this case goes to the Kavanaugh court, and I call it the Kavanaugh court because apparently John Roberts is not running that court anymore. If a case does go to the Kavanaugh court questioning whether ministers, and I'm not talking priests, I am talking about Protestant ministers, getting paid money from the federal government as a violation of church and state, the Kavanaugh court will argue, because they're not there to decide, they'll argue the point and then make a decision without naming who is writing the opinion. I'm looking at you, Alito, and others. But regardless, that court will argue and then rule that actually, there's only religion on Sundays at a church. All the other days, it's a business. Yes, we know that. And why? Okay, so they're getting their money, and we are not going to rid ourselves of these meddlesome priests because apparently they are being succored by a particular patronizing, pandering imbecile in the White House. Yes, Donald Trump. A panderer? Oh my God. How many definitions of that word can we get attributed to Trump? Yes, indeed. Well, lots more news out there coming through the transom. It looks like it wasn't just Navarro who submitted some memos, and we're going to be speaking about that a little bit here. But apparently military intelligence and our regular intelligence community had briefed the Trump administration as early as November about what was going on in China and that this pandemic could hit us and we'd be in big trouble. November. Now, Navarro had his memos in January, and Trump was still ignoring it. He was still calling it a hoax. This pandemic thing's a hoax. He still thinks it's a hoax, but, he's an imbecile. Indeed. So that is rather troubling, because it goes to the heart of this imbecile's whole approach to presidenting. And that is, don't trust anything that comes out of your government. Listen to Vlad. And I'm wondering what Vlad told him. Yeah, let it happen. I mean, geez. Yeah, we're going to make sure that your 50 states get broken up into separate entities, just like the Soviet Union. It would make me so happy to see that. Vlad wants that. That's what they were talking about in Helsinki. All right? So when Trump goes out there and says, hey, these states should have been out there acting like a bunch of mobbed up entities trying to stab each other in the back to get needed materials that they didn't know that they needed because there was no federal leadership on it. Fancy that. Oh, another thing that really bugged me about his presser again yesterday, well, not pressers, as a campaign speech, is this constant blaming China and now the World Health Organization. We'll be getting to that too. For his ineptness. It's a wag the dog thing. We know that. So is yelling at the press every day. That's another wag the dog. Let's just deflect from the fact that the imbecile really effed it up. Okay? But when he talks about China as that he blocked China from coming into the United States, that's BS. Over 500,000 people came in. They're still coming in. There's no stopping people from China. And the selling of our material, ventilators, etc., 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 and then buying them back with a tariff imposed. Who's getting the tariff? We know. It's not going into the U.S. Treasury. There's some workaround that Bill Barr found in an OLC memo that only applies to Donald Trump. That's why it's so secret. So we could surmise, once again, this has been conjectured, even here. Does Trump do this because of a financial investment? Or is this just a way of covering his ass? And we all know that when you start covering your ass, a lot more problems start coming to the fore. And we are seeing it again in real time. Let me just say real quick also about these campaign speeches that are disguised as pandemic pressers. At the very least, I really feel that people are seeing Trump for the first time. They've read a lot about him. They've seen parts of him. But when they see him running this rant on a daily basis, and the blaming and the whining and why aren't you praising me enough, and just the imbecility of it all, it's not going to fare him well. He thinks the ratings are endorsements, not realizing the American public really loves to watch a car crash. And we're watching a car crash, except this car crash at a racetrack, the parts and the metal and the whole race car is going over the fence and falling on us, the viewers. And we're getting hurt by it as well. And I think people now are finally becoming aware of the danger that this particular individual poses, let alone his whole mob syndicate. Modley resigned yesterday. Yeah, okay. Well, Trump's still calling Kosher, the aircraft commander, pretty much a cutie pie. Why did he write letters? Because he kept calling people and no one would return his calls. They blew him off. So what's the next thing you do? You write... Oh, the reason Trump doesn't like the writing of letters is because it establishes a written record. And once you have a written record, then that means it can go back and use it against you. And it is being used against him. It was distributed to so many people. So what? And what's this BS? During a time of crises as we are, Trump is whining about, well, that hospital and that state doesn't need as many ventilators. We've established that. So give him the ventilators. Jeez. Well, apparently the states have decided, the blue states, because the red states don't know how to do diddly because they know how to obstruct but not know how to lead. States like California, Gavin Newsom, have consolidated various states so that they have a consortium in which to be able to go to the marketplace. What's the marketplace doing in the midst of this? Trump is seizing material and giving it to private business to jack up the price so he gets a cut off the top? Off of every transaction? Sounds like Donnie Brasco, Lefty Ruggiero to me. Yeah, small time, let's cut off parking meters. Break them apart and take out the quotas. We're an earner. Be an earner. Yeah, he's getting a cut off of every transaction. You know it. He's a bottom feeder and always has been. Speaking of bottom feeding, let's touch upon Wisconsin very quickly here. The Republican Party knows that the more people who vote will not vote Repug. That's why they always suppress the vote. Trump was out there touting yesterday at his campaign speech, disguised as a pandemic presser, that mail-in balloting is rife with fraud. It's the biggest fraud. He voted mail-in ballot at Mar-a-Lago. He and Melania both did. The reason he's saying that is because the only people who have been signing absentee ballots in droves and then driving them to a polling place and stuffing the ballot box, are Republicans. And as recently as Georgia, with Brian Kemp and his friend. Whenever there has been some weird voter fraud, it's always the Republicans that are doing it. No wonder they think everybody is. It goes back to my old axiom. They think they're good people. And if they're getting away with this, think of all the bad people, like the black people. Think about really bad people doing it. They must really be doing it, and a lot worse than us. That's the way they think. I know, because I've heard it from the horse's mouth, from repugs who have been dipping into the federal trough. Yeah, and then blaming people of color for, being welfare queens. So they think everybody's doing it because they are. Oregon has had mail-in ballots for over 20 years, and there is no fraud. How is that? Trump is surprised that for some reason when there's more mail-in ballots, they don't vote Republican because he thinks that it's because of stuffing ballots. Some guy, a 400-pound guy on a sofa somewhere, just signing ballots. Well, the fact of the matter is, when more people vote, they don't vote Republican. And they certainly are not going to vote Republican in November if they can vote and stay alive. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? The truth about the toilet paper shortage is not about irrational hoarding. It's about the marketplace. You have your commercial buildings and you have your residential buildings, and they all need to be wiped down. Yes, they do. On the rest of the menu, Trump is moving aggressively to challenge the authority and independence of agency watchdogs overseeing his administration. He's trying to get rid of IGs. Some people would call that a coup. In fact, a lot of people already do. When confronted with memos about the severity of the pandemic he ignored in January, Trump blasted the World Health Organization for being China-centric. Yeah, well, the only reason he's saying that is because a black guy's running the World Health Organization, and he has a problem with black guys. Women, too. And despite mocking the idea of climate change, Trump will preside over one of the country's sharpest drops in climate-damaging emissions on record as the pandemic tamps down energy use. I've often wondered if the Earth actually has conscious volition. And this is kind of a response of the Earth. You guys are like choking me to death. And I have a problem. There's some sort of parasite on me causing all these fumes, these noxious fumes, to be choking me to death. I got to get rid of them. And look what's happened. We're finally having clean air. Thanks. After the break, we move to the chef's table. In what is the Swiss Army's biggest call-up since World War II, thousands of soldiers have been sent to support health workers in the fight against the pandemic. And a prominent Communist Party member who criticized Xi Jinping's handling of the pandemic is being investigated on suspicion of a severe violation of discipline and law. Well, it's not just Trump that gets away with this now, is it? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. All kidding aside, if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you help us fulfill our civic duty of being resistance radio, as well pretty much put in writing by the founders all those, about an eon ago now. And if you could afford a espresso-type coffee drink once a month sent our way, we are able to stretch those dollars on the quantum level. No theory of relativity there, it doesn't apply. But we are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare, at the subatomic level, by the way. And we have a lot of experience since we've been doing this resistance radio for 9 years, continuous, 24/7, 365 broadcasting. And we thank you for your generosity, and thank you to those who have recently increased their patronage monthly, and also to new folks who have joined up. We really do appreciate it. And you really help us put a big dent in our bills and get the needed machinery and software that we require every now and then, because apparently planned obsolescence is part of the game again. When was it never? Anyway, a small little window, planned obsolescence was looked at as a bad thing. Anyway, your generosity over all these many years and recently have allayed our issues with, well, amassing the funds to be able to pay our bills. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and so much more. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then I post those links on the social media sites, except for Facebook, because as you know, I've been suspended for a month for purely political speech. But that's the way Zuckerberg works, since he's going to be pretty much putting the Republican National Convention on. We know where his loyalties lay. And it's pretty much silencing any anti-Trump voice on their platform. And I was silenced rather effectively in a really insidious way, by the way. But I have a week left, and we'll see if I get suspended again for some untoward comment made about dear leader. Okay, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, a sad note. John Prine passed last night at the age of 73 from complications of coronavirus. He had it for about a week. And that is really sad. I like John Prine a lot. And did you know that it was an open mic? He was a mailman, and he would write song lyrics and songs on his breaks while he was delivering the mail. And someone convinced him to go to an open mic, and he sang Sam Stone. That was the first song he ever sang in public. And from there, well, he became the John Prine that we all know, love, and respect. And it's a sad passing. We all have to go, I know. But I put all of this, all of it, in the domain of Donald Trump. He has blood on his hands. And it's not the Chinese fault. It's not the World Health Organization's fault. It's not Obama's fault. It is Donald Trump and his mob family crime syndicate. It is their fault. So in spite of this pandemic, we need to get to the polls. Look what happened in Wisconsin. People risked their lives to hold on to their franchise. And I'm not talking about a 7-Eleven. All right, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Comes out of the Associated Press by Eric Tucker, Matthew Daly, and Mary Claire Jelinek. Donald Trump is moving aggressively to challenge the authority and independence of agency watchdogs overseeing his administration, including removing the Inspector General tasked with overseeing the $2.2 trillion coronavirus rescue package that passed Congress with bipartisan support. In 4 days, Trump has fired one Inspector General tied to his impeachment, castigated another he felt was overly critical of the coronavirus response, and sidelined a third meant to safeguard against wasteful spending of the coronavirus funds. Yeah, the last one was a survey of over 300 hospitals. It was not an opinion of the Inspector General. It was purely a survey of what these hospitals were experiencing, what supplies they had on hand, and what they were waiting for in the supply chain. And because Donald Trump deemed that report to make him look bad, well, look, he had a nuclear aircraft carrier commander fired because his 6 sailors made Trump look bad. The actions have sent shockwaves across the close-knit network of watchdog officials in government, creating open conflict between a president reflexively resistant to outside criticism and an oversight community tasked with rooting out fraud, misconduct, and abuse. You know what he was impeached over. Trump can say that it was an impeachment hoax. He was still impeached, and the only reason he's not removed from office is because of the corrupt Republican Party. It's the only reason. The most recent act threatens to upend scrutiny of the $2.2 trillion coronavirus rescue effort now underway, setting the stage for a major clash between Trump, government watchdogs, and Democrats who are demanding oversight of the vast funds being pumped into the American economy. He doesn't want anybody who's not going to turn their back when he's skimming off the top. The latest broadside came Tuesday when the Defense Department revealed that Trump had removed Acting Inspector General Glenn Fine, an experienced official, from his role as head of a coronavirus spending oversight board. It was unclear who might replace Fine, who lost his title as Acting Inspector General. Nancy Pelosi called Fine's abrupt removal part of a disturbing pattern of retaliation by the president against independent overseers. And that's a quote from Nancy Pelosi, because we don't use the P word when attributed to Trump. It's here at NetRisk Radio. It's a violation of our style manual. Trump, she said, is attempting to disregard critical oversight provisions that hold the administration accountable to the law. Trump himself shed a little light on the decision as he spoke to reporters Tuesday evening, saying he doesn't know Fine, but had heard the name. If he was an acting inspector general, then I guess Trump has heard of him. But we always hear Trump say that when he's caught in a corner with his hand in a cookie jar. Cookie jar? I don't see any cookie jar. I don't know a cookie jar. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is also out of the Associated Press by Jonathan Lemire, Jill Colvin, and Zeke Miller. Trump on Tuesday yesterday threatened to freeze U.S. funding to the World Health Organization, saying the international group had missed the call on the coronavirus pandemic. Trump also played down the release of a January memo, or series of memos, from a senior advisor. That's Navarro. You know, the social scientist. He's not a doctor of economics, but he's got some social science background. Not the humanities. Do not confuse the two. And Navarro, who I'm not a big fan of. But even Navarro said, look, we're in big trouble unless we act. Well, he said he had not seen them at the time, but he turned his anger on the World Health Organization, first declaring that he would cut off U.S. funding for the organization, then backtracking and saying he would consider strongly such a move. When confronted with it in the presser, he denied, I never said I was going to cut it off. And another reporter in the room said, yeah, you just did. Trump said the international group had called it wrong on the virus and that the organization was very China-centric in its approach, suggesting that the WHO had gone along with Beijing's efforts months ago to minimize the severity of the outbreak. The WHO has praised China for its transparency on the virus, even though there has been reason to believe that more people died of COVID-19 than the country's official tally. They should have known, and they should probably did know, Trump said of WHO officials. Throughout his presidency, Trump has voiced skepticism toward many international organizations, especially those run by people of color, or those who have been voted in, who are people of color. Is it a coincidence? I don't think so. And has repeatedly heaped scorn on the World Health Organization in its most recent budget proposal in February. The administration called for slashing the U.S. contribution to the organization from an estimated $122.6 million to just $57.9 million. The organization's current guidance does not advocate closing borders or restricting travel, though many nations, including the U.S., have enacted those steps. The organization declared COVID-19 a public health emergency on January 30th, nearly a month before Trump tweeted that the coronavirus is very much under control in the USA, and a full 43 days before he declared a national emergency in the United States. Remember, in January, he was calling it a hoax. In February, he was calling it a hoax. Health experts have suggested that the weekly death totals will reach a new high in the United States. And by the end of today, Wednesday, more than 13,000 people will have died from the virus in the United States of America. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Despite mocking the idea of climate change, Trump will preside over one of the country's sharpest drops in climate-damaging emissions on record as the economic paralysis from coronavirus tamps down energy use, according to an Energy Department projection. The agency's Energy Information Administration projects a 7.5% drop in fossil fuel emissions for 2020. That would be the biggest cut in U.S. energy emissions since at least 1990. The year after the start of the 2008 recession saw a 7.3% decline. Trump routinely mocks the science of climate change, and his administration has moved to roll back tougher mileage and emission standards and other climate efforts from the Obama administration. Emissions will fall markedly this year anyway, owing to the slowing economy and restrictions on business and travel related to coronavirus. Burning of fossil fuels and the rate of climate damage typically rebounds as an economy does after economic downturns. The energy agency projects Americans will burn 9% less gasoline and diesel and 10% less jet fuel, and that the electricity sector will generate 3% less power overall, among other declines. Solar and wind power, which gets scant attention from Trump, other than his statements of loathing for wind turbines, will account for the majority of the country's new electricity generation. That's actually great news. Let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Getting the Job Done. Danielle Crudy and Bridget Savage Cole first connected doing DIY film projects in New York City. They held each other's cameras for a couple of years before deciding to write together. But to write about what? Well, they were both Catholic, they both loved their mothers, and they were both obsessed with the ocean. And from these seeds and 8 years of work came the wonderful fictional winter fishing town of Easter Cove, Maine, the setting for Crudy and Cole's first feature, Blow the Man Down. It's 2019, and Mary Margaret Connolly has just died, and her death sets off events for two groups of survivors. One is a trio of friends and under-the-radar matriarchs who are now free to take care of an increasingly unsavory element in the town. The other is her pair of young adult daughters, Mary Beth, who put off college for her mother's decline, now eager to get the hell out of town, and Priscilla, burdened with a stack of medical bills, an underperforming family fish shop, and a house she can't afford. In an early shot, Crudy and Cole pan across the harbor only to have a distant car catch the camera's motion and become the shot's focus. This move is nice, but with cinematographer Todd Benhazi, Crudy and Cole's strength in Blow the Man Down lies not so much in camera work, but in camera placement, in film texture, and in the mise-en-scène that arises organically when you're making do with what you have and suddenly discover a cool location, like when a scene originally written on a houseboat becomes a chase through a maze of lobster traps. Crudy and Cole's strength is also in the characters they've crafted and the performances they've captured. Still, that early shot is an apt metaphor for a movie that says, no, the story's actually over here, with these women who are usually in the background. Here's what it's like from their perspective when a body washes up on the beach. Oh, and Blow the Man Down has sea shanties. Oh my, are there sea shanties. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky.
You know, the other day, we had a bright, sunny day, as we do today in New York, after many days of gloomy darkness and cold. And I went outside to get some milk and saw the streets were full of people. And they were all young people who'd somehow gotten the message that this is only dangerous for old people.
Laurie Garrett, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of the 1995 book The Coming Plague, Newly Emerging Diseases in a World Out of Balance. She's been on the pandemic beat for decades. She was interviewed recently on the new Sustain What webcast, launched last month by longtime journalist Andrew Revkin. He now runs an initiative on communication and sustainability at Columbia University's Earth Institute.
You know, the misinformation that's come out is just incredible. And a lot of politicians are the major vehicles of this misinformation. They've somehow gotten the word that young people can't get sick, young people can't die, they won't be hospitalized, it's really not a problem. It's only old people like me that can get sick and die. So what the heck? I'll go ahead and go out and wander around and go jogging and hang out in the park with my friends for a picnic. And you know, if I get infected, it's no biggie. Well, it is a biggie because you can infect others. You can pass your virus on. You perpetuate the epidemic. And yes, you can get sick. 40% of the seriously ill hospitalized people in New York City right now, which is the epicenter of the entire global pandemic at this moment, 40% of them are under 50 years of age. So this notion that it's just old people, dead wrong. So the consequences of any statement by any leader that isn't rooted in solid science, or if the solid science is uncertain, doesn't state the uncertainty, is socially irresponsible, is costing lives, is actually killing people.
The entire webcast is archived on YouTube with the title The Press and the Pandemic, Tips from Pulitzer winner Laurie Garrett. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1952. That was the day that President Harry S. Truman issued Executive Order 10340, nationalizing the U.S. steel industry. The president had hoped to stop a looming steel strike while the nation was embroiled in the Korean War. The president's order listed several reasons for the action, including, quote, American fighting men and the fighting men of other nations of the United Nations are now engaged engaged in deadly combat with the forces of aggression in Korea. And forces of the United States are stationed elsewhere overseas for the purpose of participating in the defense of the Atlantic community against aggression. Another stated reason was that, quote, the weapons and other materials needed by our armed forces and by those joined with us in the defense of the free world are produced to a great extent in this country. And steel is an indispensable component of substantially all of such weapons and materials. He also listed, quote, steel is likewise indispensable to the carrying out of programs of the Atomic Energy Commission of vital importance to our defense efforts. Another reason Truman claimed was that continuing an uninterrupted supply of steel is also indispensable to the maintenance of the economy of the United States, upon which our military strength depends. After the announcement of the order, it only took some steel company owners 27 minutes to file for an emergency injunction to stop the seizure. They were not successful in getting their injunction, but the case went on to the Supreme Court. In May, the court ruled in a 6-3 decision that President Truman did not have the right to seize the mills. The day the court decision came down, the steelworkers went out on strike, eventually winning pay raises.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. I'm Mark Boulanger.
Don't believe the corporate lies.
That is Robert Reich, a former Secretary of Labor in the Clinton administration in the United States. He is currently a professor of public policy at the University of California, Berkeley.
Wealthy corporations and their enablers have spread 5 big lies about unions in order to stop workers from organizing and to protect their own bottom lines. Know the truth. Lie number 1, labor unions are bad for workers. Wrong. Unions are good for all workers, even those who aren't unionized. In the mid-1950s, when 1/3 of all workers in the United States were unionized, wages grew in tandem with the economy. That's because workers across America, even those who were not unionized, had significant power to demand and get better wages, hours, benefits, and working conditions. Since then, as union membership has declined, the middle class has shrunk as well. Lie number 2, unions hurt the economy. Wrong. When workers are unionized, they can negotiate better wages, which in turn spreads the economic gains more evenly and strengthens the middle class. This creates a virtuous cycle. Wages increase, workers have more to spend in their communities, businesses thrive, and the economy grows. Since the 1970s, the decline in unionization accounts for 1/3 of the increase in income inequality. Without unions, wealth becomes concentrated at the top, and the gains don't trickle down to workers. Lie number 3, labor unions are as powerful as big business. Wrong. Labor union membership in 2018 accounted for 10.5% of the American workforce, while large corporations account for almost 3/4 of the entire American economy. And when it comes to political power, it's big business and small labor. In the 2018 midterms, labor unions contributed less than $70 million to parties and candidates, while big corporations and their political action committees contributed $1.6 billion. This enormous gulf between business and labor is a huge problem. It explains why most economic gains have been going to executives and shareholders rather than workers. But this doesn't have to be the case. Lie number 4. Most unionized workers are in industries like steel and auto manufacturing. Wrong again. Although industrial unions are still vitally important to workers, the largest part of the unionized workforce is workers in the professional and service sectors, retail, restaurant, hotel, hospital, teachers, which comprise 59% of all workers represented by a union. And these workers benefit from being in a union. In 2018, unionized service workers earned a median wage of $802 a week. Non-unionized service workers made an average $261 less. That's almost a third less. Lie number 5. Most unionized workers are white, male, and middle-aged. Some unionized workers are, of course, but most newly unionized workers are not. They're women. They're young, and a growing portion are black and brown. In fact, it's through the power of unions that people who had been historically marginalized in the American economy because of their race, ethnicity, or gender are now gaining economic ground. In 2018, women who were in unions earned 21% more than non-unionized women. And African Americans who were unionized earned nearly 20% more than African Americans who were non-unionized. Don't believe the corporate lies. Today's unions are growing, expanding, and boosting the wages and economic prospects of those who need them most. They're good for workers.
You can hear more of Mr. Reich's support for unions on his website at robertreich.org. Reich is spelled R-E-I-C-H. And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of 76 degrees, and we're going to expect a high tomorrow of 79. Wow. Overnight lows will be in the mid to upper 40s. Sunny today with winds out of the north-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Shifting tonight out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour with lows in the mid-40s. And then, of course, tomorrow, sunny with that high bumping 80 degrees with winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Jackson County, Oregon, as of late last night, has 39 confirmed cases of coronavirus. None have deceased that we know of. And I expect that number actually to go high. The case numbers are woefully behind. And that 39 seems still a little low. It's been pegged there for a day and a half. Okay, well, grass pollen is rated high. The air quality index in the region is good and still at that 24 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is high, also still at that range of 6. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.15 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 90%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. As I've mentioned before, Trump has his pea tape, I have mine, and sometimes the peas are popped. London is 68 degrees and sunny with their Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, now entering a third day in ICU because of coronavirus. Paris is 77 and sunny, and they're telling people do not go out in this wonderful spring weather because of coronavirus. Rome is 68 and sunny, and they do not have a flattening of coronavirus. Kyiv is 65 and fair, and they have coronavirus no matter what Vlad is telling them to say. Kabul is 59 and mostly cloudy, and they have coronavirus. Hong Kong is 66 and partly cloudy with a flattening of coronavirus, but they, as well as mainland China, are tracking folks who have had coronavirus, recovered, and are now testing positive again. Tokyo is 59 and clear with a, looks like a report is that they're going to shut down their country because of coronavirus. Sydney, Australia is 64 and cloudy with coronavirus. And San Francisco, California is 50 degrees, mostly cloudy with coronavirus and a statewide stay in your home order. And New York is 53 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy with so much coronavirus. The rest of the country is still sending ventilators in the hopes that we can flatten the curve because of coronavirus. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. John Miller and Silke Koltrowitz of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In the Swiss Army's biggest call-up since World War II, thousands of soldiers have been sent to support medical and health workers in the fight against the coronavirus, but the mobilization has not been without problems. Hundreds of soldiers and officers have been confined to barracks after potential exposure to the infection, and while around 80 to 90% of those who got their marching orders on March 16th answered the call of duty, more than 200 could face military justice for failing to report to their units. In total, some 5,000 soldiers, including members of medical battalions, are supporting civil personnel. They have been particularly active in Ticino, the Italian-speaking canton on the border with Italy, where many of Switzerland's 22,000 infected and 641 dead are from. Switzerland is mobilizing up to 8,000 members of the military, not only for medical service, but to help seal its borders, assist with logistics, and provide security support during the crisis. Currently, 728 military personnel are in quarantine with 49 in isolation. A total of 172 soldiers have tested positive, many of them at a school for recruits in Ticino.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A prominent Chinese Communist Party member who criticized Chinese leader Xi Jinping's handling of the coronavirus outbreak is being investigated on suspicion of a severe violation of discipline and law. Ren Zhangqing is a former head of a state-run real estate conglomerate, the Huan Group, and a party member who has been known for his outspokenness on sensitive topics such as press censorship. He dropped from sight in mid-March after publishing an online essay that criticized the leadership's handling of the virus outbreak that originated in December in central China. Actually, it started so much before that. While government data show COVID-19 apparently subsiding in China, more than 1.4 million people have been infected worldwide. A one-sentence notice issued yesterday, Tuesday, by the party government joint disciplinary watchdog body in Beijing's Western District said Ren was undergoing a, quote, review and monitoring investigation, end quote, but gave no details and did not mention Ren's article or previous statements. And the article has since been deleted by China's censors. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.